Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're glad to see you all here and welcome to the fall term. Thanks for joining us during this first week. So this year, as many of you know, is Climate Year at Drexel. This is a year to celebrate, support, and catalog our ongoing climate work happening at all levels of the university and at the Academy of Natural Sciences, as well as launch new initiatives to make combating climate change central to our institutional practices, curriculum, research, and civic engagement. One initiative has been this Climate Year Speaker Series, where we highlight work from different departments, faculty, and staff throughout Drexel and the Academy of Natural Sciences. Last month, we highlighted how climate change impacts urban health. Next month, we'll be talking about the upcoming international climate change negotiations, also called COP or Conference of Parties, and how students can follow along with the negotiations. Today, our focus is much more local. We'll be talking about sustainability initiatives on our campus through a moderated discussion. But before we get into that discussion, I'd like to note that as we build an institutional strategy for climate and sustainability at Drexel, we're doing our best to bring a justice lens to this work. And in that spirit, I'd like to acknowledge the land which Drexel University is on, Lenape, which was the traditional territory of the Leni Lenape. The passage I'm about to read was written by the Nanticoke Leni Lenape tribal nation. The Lenape people lived in harmony with one another upon this territory for thousands of years. During the colonial era and an early federal period, many were removed west and north, but some also remain along the continuing historical tribal communities of the region. In our acknowledgement of the continued presence of the Lenape people in their homeland, we affirm the aspiration of the great Lenape chief Tamanend, that there be harmony between the indigenous people of this land and the descendants of the immigrants to this land, as long as the rivers and creeks flow and the sun, moon, and stars shine. So let's get this panel started. A reminder to all that this meeting is being recorded and will be archived on the Climate Year Speaker Series webpage. Please keep yourself on mute to minimize disruptions during the panel, but we do encourage you to participate in this discussion by submitting questions in the chat, and we will do our best to get to all of them during our time together today. Rather than a presentation style seminar, today's event is more of a town hall style moderated panel discussion, and I will now introduce our wonderful moderator, Grace Zaborski. Grace is a junior environmental studies and sustainability major who is minoring in politics. She is passionate about sustainability policy and completed her first co-op with the City of Boston's Department of Environment, specifically addressing zero waste and composting in public schools. Grace just finished her second co-op last month, working with Drexel's Climate and Sustainability Working Group. And while on co-op, she analyzed the university's recent STARS report and organized the new EcoRep Student Environmental Peer Education Group. This past summer, Grace also assisted Dr. Carol, I can't pronounce her last name, Collier, sorry for mispronouncing that name, with data collection for the Delaware River Basin's Flexible Flow Management Program. After graduation, she hopes to attend graduate school for environmental policy or urban planning. Grace, please take it away.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to take a second to introduce all of our panelists today. So our first panelist is Don Liberati. He is the Associate Vice President for Drexel Business Services. Don Liberati leads the Business Services Department of Drexel University, overseeing the contracts and partnerships for campus dining, bookstores, and vending, as well as housing operations and occupancy management, the institution's identification card program, and parking. Prior to joining Drexel, Don was the Senior Director of Operations at Innovative Schools, a nonprofit whose mission was to support district and charter schools to improve student achievement results. In this role, he directed all aspects of the support services division and played an integral role in the organization's long-term financial and strategic planning. Preceding his work at Innovative Schools, Don worked in the private sector for nearly 20 years as Chief of Staff for AMC Theaters, where he was responsible for developing infrastructure to operate a new business line and deploy the concept throughout the United States. Before rising to the role of Chief of Staff, Don was the youngest manager in AMC's company history to serve as Director of Operations, with responsibility for a portfolio of 33 theaters, 32 direct reports, and $250 million in revenue. Don received a BS in Organizational Dynamics from Immaculata University and an MPA from the Fels Institute of Government at the University of Pennsylvania. He is also pursuing a Drexel LeBeau MBA expected 2022. Thank you for being here, Don. Our next panelist I'm going to introduce is Julie Jones. She is the Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer of Accounts Payable and Procurement Services. Julianne Jones is a project management and procurement strategist who partners with executives, cross-divisional teams, and external entities to strategically source and manage contractual engagements to the financial and product benefit of her sponsor. Julie is currently serving as Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer for Accounts Payable and Procurement Services at Drexel University, where she oversees the university's significant spend portfolio, as well as EOP reporting in the university's economic impact initiatives. She is focused on structuring a richly diverse procurement program that builds partnerships to keep the university aligned with their core mission of supporting students in an innovative and civically engaged environment while furthering Drexel's commitment as an anchor institution in West Philadelphia. Julie holds an MS in the Management of Information Systems from Nova Southeastern University and has begun her work on her MBA at Drexel University, specializing in finance. She is a certified project management professional, PMP, through the Project Management Institute and holds several GAGGAER software certifications. She also dedicates time to 2 Philadelphia nonprofit organizations, serving as a finance committee chair for Beyond Literacy, BLIT, and as a member of the development committee for the Board for Women Against Abuse, WAA. Thank you for being here, Julie. And then our final panelist that I'm going to introduce is Alan Greenberger, Fellow of the American Institute of Architects and Vice President of Real Estate and Facilities and Distinguished Teaching Professor and Lindy Fellow. Alan Greenberger's 47-year career has 4 significant chapters. For 43 years, he was a practicing architect with Mitchell Garagola Architects and its successor, MGA Partners, where he was a principal and design lead on many award-winning projects. In 2008, Mr. Greenberger left his practice to join the administration of then Philadelphia Mayor Mitchell Nutter as the city's chief planner and deputy mayor for economic development. Under his leadership, the city produced a new zoning code and comprehensive plan and experienced its most dynamic growth in half a century. Following the end of the Nutter administration, Mr. Greenberger was appointed Distinguished Teaching Professor and Lindy Fellow at Drexel University, where he served as head of the Department of Architecture, Design, and Urbanism for 5 years. In March of 2021, Mr. Greenberger was appointed Vice President for Real Estate and Facilities for Drexel, where he is now responsible for long-range campus planning, as well as facility operations and maintenance. Though he has stepped down as a department head, he continues to teach in the architecture and urban strategy programs. Alan, thank you so much for joining us today. So I guess we're going to start off with our first question. Before I do that, I just want to make it super clear that please submit any questions that you might have in the chat below. We will try and answer as many of your questions as we can. So as we continue this conversation, feel free to drop your questions. We'd love to hear them. We'd love to have them answered. So please feel free to share in the chat. All right, moving to our first question. How is sustainability a priority in your job, and what are you currently working on to promote sustainability on Drexel's campus? Alan, if you would like to start.
Sure, and I want to establish a bit of a context for this. Corin, if you could bring up that very brief set of images.
Can you see the whole screen?
Yeah, well, there we go. I don't know if you can all see the whole screen. It looks like it's only a piece of it.
Is it? Okay. Try it again.
I can also talk through it. I don't want to waste everybody's time. But let's see if you can bring it up on the second shot. And if not, oh, here you go. You got it. Look, this first picture is just eyewash to tell you that sustainability is an enormous topic that reaches into every aspect of our lives. You've asked me about priorities in my job in real estate and facilities. We're very involved in a very discrete and significant aspect, and that is the energy use in our buildings and our resultant carbon footprint. And to put that into perspective, Corin, if you go to the next slide, it tells a very interesting story. Okay, basically what you're looking at on the left is the energy use in the United States in 2019. And what you can see there is that nearly 80% of the energy that's consumed in this country just 2 years ago is non-renewable: coal, petroleum, natural gas. Renewables are 11%, nuclear is another 8%. And then it breaks out all of what renewable means. So all that says is we have a long way to go. And the other chart on the other side says, where's this energy being used? And basically, you can think of it like this. A third of the energy consumption in this country is used to create electrical power. Another third, roughly speaking, is used around transportation. And another third is used to deal with buildings, most of which is consumed in the industrial side. The university lives in that 4.7% sector of commercial activity. And of course, we all live somewhere in that residential activity. So if you just go to the last slide a minute, which is going to look far more convoluted, and I'm not going to try to explain the detail, but it basically says, here's the energy use on the one side, on the left side. A stack of it gets used to produce electric power, which is in the middle on the bottom there in gray and black. And then all of that feeds into these so-called these industrial, transportation, residential, commercial uses. And actually, and I did this, if you sort of calibrate the numbers one to the other, they all sort of stack up. The reason I'm showing you this slide is to remind us not to suggest that the things we have to do are insignificant. They are significant. And we as a university have to do our part. But we also have to be cognizant of where the tremendous amounts of energy are used in this country, some of which we can affect individually or through policies, particularly around transportation, and some of which, for instance, in the electrical generation, which is an enormous category, we don't have as individuals or necessarily even as institutions the kind of control on those things, or as cities, the kind of control on those things that we do in other realms. You can take the slide down. That's just by way of context. I'm happy to make these slides available. Frankly, I just pulled them off the internet myself. So our focus in real estate and facilities, as I said, is to push us and our use of buildings towards lower energy use, renewable energy use, and carbon neutrality. I'm going to stop there and suggest that we go on to Don and Julie, because we'll fill out these answers as we go through more questions, I'm sure. Don, how about I'll pass to you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alan. Yeah, I mean, I guess just in terms of follow-up, I mean, I think the things that, you know, we're really kind of thinking about, in most cases, we're working in partnership with someone to kind of accomplish our goals. So as I think about campus, we are placed in we have locations that go throughout the campus. And in those cases, we'll be working, you know, directly with Alan and his team on some of the initiatives that they will be implementing. But then sort of more directly, we're working with our third-party partners, and particularly Aramark, which really does have, I think, an opportunity for impact on different initiatives to, you know, kind of rethink how we, you know, deliver, serve, and kind of provide food on campus. But you know, as part of like just our regular, you know, sort of day to day, I think one of the things we really do is try to keep this as an ongoing conversation, you know, between ourselves, between us and our business partners, and between, you know, various students that we interact with, you know, fairly regularly on campus, to ensure that we're really kind of thinking about each of our moves and how we make them. So I'll stop there and turn it over to Julie.
Okay. You know, our answers are all going to sound somewhat similar in that I think, you know, this space is so broad. And with procurement in particular, it's still a little undefined. So a lot of what we're doing right now is education and discovery. But what we realized, you know, a year or so ago when we started talking about sustainability through the Institutional Effectiveness Committee is that there's much more work to be done here. And a lot of that upfront work is determining what kind of data we can really have access to and what does sustainable purchasing mean. So as a part of our initiatives for fiscal 22, we've developed a socially responsible purchasing program. And that encompasses our supplier inclusion, but now it's added into other layers, sustainability and also surplus. And our surplus program has been, I think, under advertised for a very long time, but Bo Solomon has certainly been on it for quite a few years now. And annually, we avoid costs of about $150,000 in disposal, and we divert approximately 30 tons from landfills. And so we already had kind of a significant piece that plays into sustainability in place. And now we're able to kind of broaden that. So what we're working on now is doing purchasing assessments and developing what we call a 5% sustainable procurement goal for FY22. And basically what that's going to boil down to is us figuring out what type of data constitutes sustainable purchasing and how much we have access to that. And to Don's point, with our major partners, they've been tracking this stuff for quite some time. So we have the ability to talk to Aramark about their sustainable purchasing, and they're very much on top of it. And other entities like Amazon, even in your daily personal activities, when you go to Amazon, a lot of times things will pop up and talk about their green certification and so forth. So it's a broad landscape to look at, and we're basically just kind of tapping into it now and figuring out what that's going to mean for Drexel and how we manage that and how we encourage that. So big piece is education.
Thank you all for your answers. Those are all really great. The second question we have is, how has climate and sustainability become a part of your job in the time that you've been at Drexel that is different from when you first started? So how has it kind of evolved while you've been in your position?
Well, I would say, and I'm reflecting on my experiences in practice as an architect, and then being part of the leadership of the city under Michael Nutter. Sustainability has gone from being a discrete topic to being a universal topic, meaning it is part of pretty much everything we do. And the more we understand it in those terms, the better off we're going to be in the long run. So, the things that Julie was just talking about how we purchase things, the things that our third-party partners do, that Don was talking about, for instance, with Aramark, how they supply things. These are all part of a much more comprehensive picture. And I have to tell you that the thing that I learned, particularly in time in government, that an attitude that I bring to this job, is that there is not one single problem out there, whether it's at the scale of the city or sustainability or pretty much anything else, that gets to be solved with one answer. It just doesn't exist. And it means that in order to have more comprehensive answers, we have to spend a lot more time communicating with each other about the interrelated pieces of things we do. We all have something to do. And by the way, we all have something to do individually as well. And this is part of a broader cultural change that I think probably for most of the people, if not all of the people on this call, it's coming more into focus. And listen, I'm as guilty as anybody. If I'm driving to work, I'm sitting there thinking, should I be driving to work? Shouldn't I be on the transit? I could do that. And so, there's all these accommodations to make. What level of temperature comfort are you willing to live with at work, at Drexel, and in your own house? Are you willing to be a little colder in the winter and put on a sweater? Are you willing to be a little warmer in the summer? Because there are things we can do systematically, and there are things we are absolutely looking to do systematically, and certainly in terms of how we manage our buildings. But it can't be. It won't work by itself, I guess is the statement here. I think that's the greatest revelation I've come to in the last decade about sustainability issues.
Thanks for your answer. Don, would you like to answer how has sustainability become part of your job in your time that you've been at Drexel that's different from when you first started?
Yeah, I would sort of note on, I would probably note two things. I think building on what Alan had just mentioned, I think there's a much more integrated conversation going on across the Drexel departments over the last several years about how we approach not just sustainability, but some areas where as a university, we have an opportunity for real impact. And I think, we are really sort of communicating, we talk, with each other and try to strategize around with each other, because in the end, no single one of us can probably, deliver everything that we need to. But when we're working together, I think in a more coordinated fashion, we have the opportunity for larger impact. The other thing I would, say is, as I've been here now 7 years, and as I've watched and understood how students evaluate some of our programming, I would say probably 7 years ago, it was really more weighted towards what's the, like, if you take our mark, what's the quality of the food, and over time, what I've seen that shift to, obviously the quality of the food is really important, and the quality of the service delivery, continues to be very important. But I think, the way that our partnerships are being evaluated is broader, and we're looking, and what is being looked at is the corporate practices that, in some cases is the account, in some cases is the organization more broadly, but things like their sustainability and other, economic impact initiatives really is part of a conversation, and how people, I think about and evaluate the businesses.
Thank you for your answer. Julie, would you like to contribute?
Sure. So interestingly, Alan touched on, our personal practices, and I've been engaged and interested in sustainable practices long before I started in procurement. I wasn't nearly as educated as our students are today, but for me, it really came down to, two things: feeling really disrespectful to waste so many things that so many others don't even have access to at all. And then this kind of overarching concern of, like, where is all this stuff going to go eventually? And then on the climate side of things, even in my relatively short lifespan, which is approaching half a century now, we've seen climate trends change. And so all these things are happening if we're aware of them. Being at Drexel gives me the opportunity to make a greater impact on that than just constantly annoying my two sons with, friendly reminders about waste and lights and water and so forth. So I would say the thing that I'm, most impressed by, and the only thing I can say is I've been a champion of it, but honestly, the Climate Sustainability Working Group has really done all the work, and Grace, you significantly part of that. Is Drexel submitting our first sustainability tracking assessment and rating report, our first STARS report, with what I would consider a very respectable bronze rating, and feeling pretty confident that a silver rating for 2022 is attainable with exactly what's happening now, right? Us all talking about it, bringing a spotlight to it, and really developing policies and practices and starting to become more engaged and aware.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Julie. So our next question is, what are you most proud of in your work as it relates to sustainability? Alan, would you like to start?
I think at the moment, the thing that I feel best about is that it is now, and this partly, by the way, comes from the work of the task force that Julie just referenced that Bo manages. The task force has elevated this to a very visible level, and that has showed up in my world, where we are talking constantly now about what we can do to run our buildings more efficiently, to use less energy, to be smarter about everything we do. It is out in the open, and we're just, and I have to admit that we are at the beginning. By the way, some of the thing Julie just referenced about the STARS report, one of the nice things about that, the bronze listing, was that the ability, as Julie suggested, to get to STARS with what we do right now is there. We just have to reveal it. There's a lot of things we're doing that make a lot of sense. We have to file a report with the city as a major, basically property manager. We have to benchmark our energy consumption with the city. Our current benchmarking suggests that we are running about 30% more efficient than the average of all the people in Philadelphia who have to benchmark. Well, that's a good thing. That's a good start. We have to do better because we've got old buildings, old systems, lots of things that aren't working the way they're supposed to. But the fact that it's out there and is visible, and all of you, and I suspect a lot more people on this campus who are sensitive to this issue, are going to demand more transparency about how we're doing. And obviously, you know, just saying, well, we're doing this well and we're not doing that well is not going to be the end of the story. There's going to be community-wide pressure to do better. And I think this is what I see becoming part of our culture, both in the real estate and facilities, but I think also more generally in the university. And I feel very good about that.
Thank you. Don, would you like to add your perspective?
Yeah, I think the two things that I kind of think a lot about, you know, one of the things I would say, you know, as we sort of roll things out, you know, you find some things work and some things don't, and some things need to be tweaked. But I've been really pleased with, you know, sort of my team and you know, everybody who's working on this, that everybody really seems really focused on, you know, problem solving when it comes to some of the things that we're doing. So, you know, as an example, you know, one of our key initiatives, you know, we were trying to figure out how do we, you know, stop using single-use items for takeaway food at the Hans. So, you know, we tried one solution and, you know, we kind of found that, okay, you know, we give these things out, they all go back to the residence hall rooms, they never make it back, you know, so, you know, are we really sort of creating something that is, you know, impactful? But then, you know, we bought a machine and now the machine's at Northside Dining Terrace. So I think, you know, taking each thing, you know, trying it out, seeing how it works, really observing and you know, assessing what are the results from what we're doing, and then, you know, tweaking it, trying it again, and, you know, again, sort of being out there and, you know, trying to collect feedback. So I feel like just in terms of a model of how we're going to create and be impactful with change long term, I feel really good that we're starting to build a system that we think will work. The other thing I would say is last spring we did a interdisciplinary case competition, which again, really, I thought, you know, was something that I sort of have been thinking a lot about over the last year, is how do we continue to have our programming align really well with some of the academic things that are going, or like the academic mission of the university, and, you know, where there's significant overlap, we can learn a lot. So I felt like that was a really good first step, and a good example of where, you know, we really engaged, we learned a lot, we got some great ideas about how we can communicate and think a little bit differently about some of our practices. But again, hopefully starts to set a model of how we can engage, you know, in a more broad way with the community.
Yeah, and then Julie, what are you most proud of in your work as it relates to sustainability?
So I would say the thing that I'm most proud of, I'm kind of proud on behalf of Drexel, because again, other than being a champion, had very little to do. The Institutional Effectiveness Committee on Sustainability that was established a couple of years ago now, out of the university-wide call to engage and talk about things that we think Drexel is missing or could do better. That committee was led by Lisa Miller of the Academy of Natural Sciences, and all of this extraordinary work that's happening now was kind of born of that committee. And it's leading to the creation of a Drexel Sustainability and an Office of Sustainability. So that will actually have a physical location and kind of gather all of that great work that has been done around our campus and is also now being planned. And again, under that umbrella of being recognized. I would say that for me personally, I'm most proud of kind of stepping out and educating myself on an area that I, again, personally was educated, but professionally is a very different story. And a couple years ago, again, out of having conversations with Lisa Miller and Lucy Kerman, I said, you know what, let me go out there and find the school that really does this the best. And I locked in on ASU, luckily had a relationship with a wonderful vice president out there, Nicole Awama. We had a wonderful conversation. She shared a lot of information. So I guess I'm mostly proud of educating myself and then hopefully trying to set forth and put policies and practices in place that we have been lacking.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, what would you like to see Drexel's sustainability efforts be in the next 10 to 20 years? And what will your next area of focus be? Alan, would you like to start?
We are focused very much on 20 years because in 20 years, it'll be 2041. That coincidentally is Drexel's 150th anniversary. So it's a nice sort of stars coming into alignment. And we're imagining these 20 years in 5-year increments, no great surprise there. And we are in the process of mapping out what we think are those 5-year steps and what kind of goals we can achieve. Now, obviously, as I've said before, our biggest one relates to our energy usage and our ability to be carbon neutral. Excuse me. Lots of institutions are making pledges about carbon neutrality. And I think based on what I showed you earlier and what we know are the realities of getting there, none of that stuff is easy and nobody is 100% sure of where they're going and how they're getting there. Carbon neutrality at an institutional level can be achieved by buying renewable energy credits. And what that means is you can pay money that would be used to buy or enable there to be more extensive wind and solar farms, for example, most of which, or many of which, will not be immediately in this area. So, is it a good thing? Yeah, it's a good thing. Does it, if you did that at 100% to offset your own carbon usage, your own carbon footprint, on paper, that's legit. But, you know, I think we've all said to ourselves, that can't be the way we're doing this. I mean, renewable energy credits may be part of a broader portfolio of what you do, and it does have value nationwide and worldwide, but we have to sort of reform our own house as well. So what does that mean? Well, it could mean, and this is something we're about to embark on, our systems throughout our buildings range from pretty sophisticated and new to antiquated and not new at all. And we run the gamut because we have buildings that are very old and we have buildings that are fairly new. The cost of upgrading those systems is really high and really disruptive potentially. We've batted around numbers in our own shop of anywhere from $50 to $100 million of improvements that we would like to see made to our system infrastructure. And not surprisingly, dedicated alumni and friends are generally not giving money to have their name put on an air handler. So how do we do this? And good news, I suppose, is that there are a lot of firms out there, control firms, energy supply firms, HVAC firms that are perfectly happy to either loan you money at fairly decent rates or finance the overhaul of systems by themselves and have the energy savings that come with that pay for those costs. It's a business idea. Nothing's coming for free, but we are going to do a pilot project with one such entity that we think has value, and we're going to test this out and see what does it work, and two, how does it work? What consequences come out of this that may not be foreseen at the moment? I would say in the next year, probably even in a shorter period than that, we're going to at least embark on such a project, have it defined, see whether it works on paper, and if it does, try to implement it and then test it and see what happens. That may be a way to get to what we want to do. It's a big deal, and it's very hidden infrastructural things. Control systems are a big deal. Old air handlers are a big deal. Less efficient chillers and boilers are a big deal. This is where we have to be spending a lot of time and attention. And coincident with it, sorry to go on this, but coincident with it is staffing and the ability to monitor these things properly and being able to make adjustments even on daily basis to make sure that our systems are running as efficiently as we can relative to the conditions that are out there on a given day. There's a lot more to say on that, but I'm going to stop right there for the time being.
Thank you, Alan. Don, would you like to note where you'd like to see Drexel's efforts being in the next 10 to 20 years and where your main area of focus will probably be?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, the couple things that we're really thinking a lot about, and this is probably nearer term than, you know, we're looking at anywhere we have single-use plastic still that exists within the infrastructure of any of our partners, and trying to figure out how do we remove that. Like we recently the urban eatery, so you know, kind of little by little trying to identify that.
Sorry. Don, your audio is going in and out a little bit. I don't know if it's the position where you are, but we missed the last bit of what you were saying.
Now? Okay. So I'll just kind of pick back up, but you know, so really looking at our
It's still going in and out, Don.
no, okay. Julie, do you want to pick up and I'll see if I can?
Yep, I was just going to jump in and say that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to start by saying that, I mean, Alan really summarized and encompassed a lot of what I would say from Drexel's perspective, right? With carbon neutrality being the ultimate goal and all of these things that we can participate in. You know, to Alan's point exactly, there are definitely things that we can do to pay for that carbon neutrality. You know, when we book flights, we can pay additional fees to offset. So there are a lot of those things that can happen. So the ultimate goal is everything that Alan just said, right? Relooking at our infrastructure and how we can change. But what he also said that is really important for us to kind of realize is that all of that is terribly expensive. So for my group in particular, I mean, Alan's got a much heavier lift here let's just be honest about it, in the facilities area. For my area, it's really looking at what all of our partners do, right? And it's much easier to kind of be on the side of holding other people accountable than having to do some of the things that bring that to life. And that's what we'll be working on, you know, looking at our suppliers, our partners, talking about climate friendly procurement with them. And then again, my immediate focus is really compiling data, trying to see what type of data is available, what do we need to be tracking differently, and then what are best practices in procurement and implementing that across the university. So those are the ways that my group, can directly affect that. And then of course, again, and I know that one of the questions is going to be, you know, how can you get involved? And I think where we have to focus a lot of times is individually, right? So our individual selves, our individual departments, and what we all can do. So my team definitely is doing that. You know, we are, you know, even in the context of results of the pandemic and working model. So we're going into a hybrid flex model. We gave back half of our physical space to be able to reduce our footprint and transportation, being almost fully, there are still some accounts payable functions that can't be fully electronic, but we're basically almost fully electronic. And I'll tell you, you know, it was interesting, kind of one of my first times back in the office. We've been doing this for 18 months. And when I tell you, there's not a scrap of paper on my desk at home right now where I am. It's monitors and keyboards. I went back into the office and saw all this paper, on my desk and all these magazines. And I thought, I've lived without this for 18 months. What could it have possibly been that was so important that was residing on my desk and had to be printed out? So, there are things that we can do individually. I think that the community would be astonished at how many individual printing devices we have across the campus. That's certainly something that we're focused on, and we're in the middle of developing a proposal for, and I'm actually getting ahead of myself to a question that you're going to ask later. So I'm going to stop there and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But these are things that we are focused on, is trying to see what the change that we can affect. Hopefully Don is back up.
How you doing there, Don?
Oh no, I think you're still cutting in and out a bit.
No. Okay, I'll try coming out.
Okay. Grace, if you wouldn't mind, there's two comments in the chat, one from Gordon Richards and the other from Britt Falstick, that I'd like to address. And it's consistent with what I think is your next question about challenges. So if you don't mind, I want to respond to those.
Yes, of course.
And I'll just read a piece of Gordon Richards. It says, Drexel may be small compared to industry. There are many reasons for us to be pushing on the frontier. While we may become small, there are many reasons to be pushing on the frontiers of sustainability. True. To me, that means solar and geothermal. So I wonder why we aren't making more efforts on those fronts. My colleagues 20 years into the future would thank us for making such investments today. And Brett talks about a story that he's linked into here from 2012 that talks about how we had been buying electricity from renewable sources, and is that happening anymore? So those are related questions. So this comment I made before about renewable energy credits, one of the things that we think we need to do, and we need to do this in collaboration, probably best done with some of our institutional pals at Penn, CHOP, hospitals, and so on, is to see whether some of the money that we might otherwise spend on things like renewable energy credits could be more directed towards renewable sources that are more in our geography, so that when that power, if it's power related, that power that's created can be put into the grid that directly serves this region, the PJM grid. That's a very early set of thoughts. Whether we can legitimately embark upon that ourselves, I don't know whether we have the wherewithal to do that, but these are conversations that we want to have with our colleagues that are in this immediate area. The other thing is, yes, apparently I'm told, and I wasn't here at the time, so I'm relaying this secondhand. Yes, apparently we did used to purchase, I don't know whether it was all of our electricity or some of our electricity from renewable sources. In the way that, at home, you can sign up with an energy source that is all renewable. And of course, just to be clear on what that means, is that when you do that, you are more renewable energy is being put into the grid from those sources. It doesn't mean that that's what's coming out of the wall plug. What's coming out of the wall plug could be coming from any number of sources, but obviously the more renewable energy there is in the grid, it presumably means the more we are suppressing the use of non-renewable sources, all to the good. And the question, going back to Gordon Richards' question is, can we do it in a highly directed way so that we know that energy in the grid that we are using, that we keep being told rely more on electricity, is coming, we can say confidently, is coming from renewable sources. We don't have clear answers on that yet, but I think these are all good comments that both Gordon and Britt are making.
Thank you. Yes. Don, I noticed you're back. I think we're going to, if there's anything that you would like to kind of complete your thought, I know that you're kind of cut off in the middle there about your focus and for the next 10 to 20 years and where you'd like to see sustainability. If you'd like to make like a quick note on that, I'd love to hear what your point was from before, and then we can move to the next question.
Okay, I apologize. I'm sorry for the internet issues today. Hopefully this will work a little bit better. Yeah, I mean, kind of the couple of things that we're really thinking about. I think I was talking about, just reduce packaging and, how everything is packaged through the program. I think the other opportunity we really have that may be a little bit unique to business services is looking at food waste and trying to think about how we, continue to supply, good amounts of food and the quantity that, people would expect out of the dining program, but, trying to minimize where we might have waste anywhere we can. And the other thing, and I'm sorry, Julie, you may have kind of picked up on some of this while I was out, but I think we also are really trying to think about our sourcing, especially with our third party partnerships. We do this work really close with Julie and her team to just think about that, both in terms of how do we continue to drive our partners to the community and businesses that are local, but also just how do we, kind of continue to reduce the amount of time and travel that our supplies are getting here to us on campus. So I think they're kind of like the three broad areas that we're thinking about.
Thank you, Don. All right, moving to our next question. You've mentioned some challenges in your previous answer. Are there any other challenges that your team is facing when implementing sustainability practices on campus? Alan, I know you touched on it in your last answer. Is there anything you'd like to add, though?
Yeah, there's just a few anecdotes just to show you the complexity of the problem. And actually, one of them I'm going to cite, Don, theoretically comes from your world, not your cause, just something that lives there. So look, I still eat meat. I love a good hamburger, but we know because it's well documented that the amount of methane that's put into the atmosphere as a result of cattle to produce beef is enormous. And while apparently there are, I don't know exactly, I don't have a picture in my head about some of the techniques that are used to capture this. They're probably as weird and graphic as you can imagine. The fact is, there isn't some new version of cattle out there that isn't putting methane into the air. So the question is for us, so like, what does that mean for us? So it might mean that we need to lean in or advocate for a culture of less meat eating so that we just have less of it on campus. That's one version of how you do it. Another version of how you do it is you throttle back the supply of the offerings you make that are based in meat. Are we prepared to do that? And I don't have an answer for that question, but that's a question that's out there. Another version is what kinds of things should we be doing with the transit agency to promote access to campus via mass transit over cars? It's a problem at the moment because of COVID, although transit is slowly coming back. Don and I actually had a conversation, I don't know, it seems like about a month ago, around parking. Like, what should we be doing about parking? It's the same question. Should we be throttling back the supply? Should we be changing the cost of parking to create incentives to go to mass transit? Are there technical systems for how we do parking that might enable a more flexible version that might encourage more use of mass transit? These are questions that are out there. And the one that directly comes from my universe is, and this is a very COVID related one, there is, because of COVID, there is an increased demand for outside air in the spaces we live in inside. Well, you can imagine the more, and by the way, all mechanical systems are based on the premise that you have some outside air mixed with recirculated air inside that you're conditioning. And you can imagine if you were only conditioning outside air, and that's all you were doing in the winter and in the summer, you'd be putting massive amounts of energy into, let's just use the example, it's 20 degrees outside, and you're going to condition exclusively 20-degree air because you want that level of ventilation. And I'm not saying it quite goes like that, but I'm being a little extreme to make the point. That takes an enormous amount of energy. to pull that off. And frankly, the systems are not designed to handle it anyway. They would all fall apart. So again, there are numerous sort of contradictions in the system that we need to be open about, discuss thoroughly, and decide where we as a, not simply as a systems, but as a community, where we're willing to, how we're willing to put our money where our mouth is. And it's not easy because it takes a lot of cultural changes as well as systematic changes.
Thank you, Alan. Don, would you like to address some of the challenges that your team faces when implementing sustainability practices on campus?
Yeah, I don't know if I'll be able to add much to what Alan just said. I mean, I think he really captured exactly what we sort of face, that with each change, there are things that we cannot, obviously do that are more behind the scenes that don't really touch anyone and maybe no one is aware of, that could just be decisions. But a lot of what we might do might require some behavioral change, and how you prepare people for that, how you get people sort of ready for it, and at the end of the day, like, what is the tolerance? I think are all things that we just need to be aware of as we sort of move forward through all this. So I'm not sure, like I said, if there's much more I can add to what he shared.
And I'm just going to, before you ask me, Grace, I'm going to jump in right behind Don because it's going to be a similar answer. The challenges are, education, number one, for my team, and then as well as the community, right? When we talk about, some of these larger facilities and energy related topics are well covered, but when you start talking about sustainable purchasing, there has to be some education around that. And then I think the other challenge is going to be financial implications and impacts. That's not always the case. I will tell you that, oftentimes green products are similarly priced, if not sometimes even cheaper for recycled products. So I think education and financial implications are going to be challenges that we'll face and have to determine how to best mitigate and address and educate.
Thank you. All right, our next question is, have you had any surprises or learned anything new when pushing for sustainability on campus?
For me, I think it's these consequential contradictions that keep popping up is a big one. And look, and I sorry that I ignored in the chat the first comment from Jason Baxter about, what are we doing to get to 100% renewable electricity? We'd love to be there. My understanding about why we're not purchasing it was a pure monetary decision. As money became harder to come by, we started cutting things. This happened before I was here. I would like to get us back to the point where we are buying more renewable energy, whether that's directly ourselves. There's a comment that Penn is building a huge off-campus solar farm. That's a great thing. We want to talk to them about that. And exactly, are they doing it? To the extent they're doing it, what's it cost them to do it? Different institutions have different financial capabilities, obviously. So that's kind of the real surprises are the subtleties of the system that continually pop up that say, oh, you thought you were going down that path. Well, it turns out that path is either not as easy or not as effective or costs far more money than you have. And, we have to reckon with these decisions that have to be made about how to balance our, the goals that we have. Those are really the sort of ongoing surprises. The good news is, the thing that's not a surprise is that there's real, I think at a very personal level, faculty, staff, students, there's a real impetus behind figuring out what the right thing is and doing it. And the more pressure there is on that front, I hope done with an appreciation for the complexities of getting there, the better off we're all going to be. We have to do this. We just have to. There's no question anymore.
Thank you, Alan. Don, have you learned anything new or had any surprises when pushing for sustainability?
No, I mean, I would say the only, and I think Julie sort of referenced this a little bit earlier, is that, you know, you learn a lot kind of along the way. I think you learn a lot about, um, you know, like one of the things we did, you know, I think it was about 2.5 years ago now, we put like a digester down in our, in the Hans, and I mean, which basically turns food into liquid waste. And, you know, I mean, I learned more about all of that and sort of that process than, you know, so I think those moments are really good, and you learn a lot about how things, you know, sort of work, and then you're able to kind of apply that along the way. So I think there's little things like that, but I really agree with Alan. I mean, I think there's a ton of opportunity. I think, you know, there's a lot of openness to trying to figure out what those opportunities are and sort of how we implement them.
Yep, I got you, Grace. You know, it's been a constant evolution of learning for me. I would say that I was surprised at how many opportunities there are to incorporate sustainable purchasing practices, and I continue to be surprised. And I've also been pleasantly surprised at how much we were already doing around the campus, and how much interest and engagement there was already before things were more formally organized. So, you know, the learning will continue. I'm encouraged by these conversations, and by, I think, the interest of the campus. I'm truly, and Grace, you are very much responsible. I'm enamored with our students and their education on these matters. I mean, it's, you know, when I'm in the room with Grace and Bo, I am the dumbest person in the room on this topic. So I am grateful for their support.
Thank you, Julie. Our next question is, have you encountered resistance to bringing sustainable business practices to higher education? And if so, how do you address resistance? And Don, I'd like you to start this question, just because you do kind of have that foot in business services.
I'm sorry, you broke out just a little bit for me when you were asking. Can you just, with the question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, of course. Have you encountered resistance to bringing sustainable business practices to higher education? And if so, how do you address this resistance?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when I was kind of reading through the questions, we really haven't. I mean, I would say what we do kind of experience is, and I think I sort of referenced this a little bit earlier, is, you know, sort of education and communication. As we, you know, we gave out, you know, if we give out reusable bags, it's like, how do you sort of encourage and help everyone understand that really the point of the bag is so that we don't have bags up at our grocery store anymore. Or, you know, if we give out reusable cups, that, you know, you take cups away from sort of the dining location. So I think it's trying to find the balance of, as we are putting things out, you know, how do you sort of encourage participation? But I would say, you know, from, at least from my perspective, nothing that have we done so far have we gotten any, you know, level of pushback. But with each thing, we really do, I think, and it's with, I think, everything that we do, there's a lot of information being given all the time. It's like, how do you effectively communicate this stuff, and how do you continue to reinforce it over time?
Thank you, Don. Julie or Alan, do either of you have anything that you'd like to add? Or we can also move to the next question if you don't really have much to add.
No, I would only offer that if there's any place that you ought to encounter less resistance, it probably is in an institution of higher education. There's a lot known. There are task forces like the one we've been talking about. There's communications. You know, there's just, the bag thing is a great example, Don. You know, Philadelphia now has a no bag policy. We'll obviously do that as well. And I will bet you anything that it will be largely accepted without a lot of wrinkles on campus. But I will also bet you anything that there's going to be fights that break out in supermarkets in various neighborhoods. When somebody says, where's the bag? I can't carry this stuff myself and I didn't have a bag. Oh, you want me to spend $1 on a canvas bag that you're making available to me? There's going to be fights. Hopefully we get over them quickly, but you know, you can easily imagine that being happening easily.
Well, and I can kind of follow up with that too, because what Alan's talking about is a mandate, right? And so we have the opportunity to do similar things to that. You know, as we are configuring our travel and expense software, we could mandate that when anyone books air travel, they pay that fee for the offset. But what's the university's tolerance for it, right? And it does come down to, you know, individual departments trying to work within a budget that is already challenged, let's say, and you know, where's that trade-off, and how does the university help and kind of balance and fund that? And you know, how do we address all these things? I mean, it really comes down to doing the little things. Every little thing counts. It adds up to big things. Looking at cost savings from, you know, kind of one side of the house to fund the other side of the house. So all the work that we do in surplus, can that help fund some of our sustainable actions? And then, you know, finally, and it does come down to exactly what Alan said, we are an institution of higher education. We have a long history of innovation, community impact, and environmental awareness. And, you know, it's the right thing to do, and it's the necessary thing to do for our future.
Thank you, Julie. And then our final question is, as part of Climate Year, we've been bringing together students, staff, and faculty in the climate space. Do you have any advice for individuals who are interested in campus sustainability and want to make a difference? And I'm just going to throw this out to anyone, whoever would like to start.
Yeah, I mean, just from my perspective, I would encourage anyone to reach out. I mean, you can reach out to me personally. You know, you can go to our website and kind of see all of our team. But if you have ideas, if there are things that you would like to sort of partner or work on, we're really kind of open to trying to figure out, you know, how we work together to have an impact. So I would, like I said, just highly encourage you to reach out through any way you'd like.
And to that point, get involved. There are committees that have already been developed. They'll continue to evolve. Eco reps for the students. From a purchasing standpoint, we can do department audits, help you look at your spending habits. I mentioned earlier, we're developing a print policy. So, you know, if we could all be supportive of that, that'd be great, because that's, you know, I already have trepidation about reaching out and telling people that they have to give me back their personal printers. So if we could kind of get in that mindset, it would be wonderful. The plastic bag ban in Philadelphia goes into effect October 1st. Get your reusable shopping bags ready so you're not fist fighting in the Acme line to check out. And then just stay connected, right? I mean, Climate and Sustainability has a wonderful website. Procurement has a socially responsible purchasing website that links out to that, talks about stories, and has ways to get involved.
And Don and Julie said exactly the right things, and I certainly agree. I think also there's, you know, just being involved, I think is critical. There's an awful lot of smart people at a university, and none of us, certainly I'm speaking for myself, me and my leadership team within real estate and facilities, we're smart. We have ideas about how things ought to go, but we don't have all the ideas, and we may be wrong in some instances. There's a lot of smart people here. We welcome your input. You know, we'd like it to be respectful and you know, not accusatory. That would be nice, just as a matter of civil behavior. But this is what we're good at, folks. And we should take advantage of the intelligence that exists in a place like this to make the best possible decisions that we can. So yes, I would encourage you to all of you to reach out, speak up, be part of organizations, make your feelings known, and do it in as smart a way as I know we're all capable of.
Thank you, everyone. And yes, I also, if you're a student, I put the link to the EcoReps interest form in the chat. So if you'd like to be involved in a peer education group for students this fall and winter, we're just starting up now, so feel free to fill out that interest form. And then if you are staff or faculty of Drexel University, feel free to email sustainability@drexel.edu to get in touch with the climate and sustainability team and learn more about ways that you can be more sustainable at Drexel as well. So those are some great resources, and also everyone's websites, as said before. If there are no more questions through the chat, I'm going to invite all of our panelists to share some closing thoughts. Anything you would like to add before we close out our panel for today?
Okay, I'll start because I haven't gone first yet, and I and I forgot. So do the small things, right? And that's what I would say. So anytime you chip away at trying to make a larger change, you have to make a smaller one. So if you're a department leader, if you're head of, even if you're an individual, stop with the water bottles, no K-cups, get the reusable cups to use, no plastic straws, you have your own utensils at your desk, turn your lights off, make sure that your department thermostats are set well. It's all the stuff that you would do in your normal life. Do it on campus. And just keep in mind every single thing that you do. I mean, I realize I'm neurotic, but it comes down to like even the small things. Anybody that uses lotion knows that they design those containers so you cannot get to the bottom of that lotion. So every time I open it up and I look like I'm, a poor, no offense, college student, because we've all been there and eaten ramen and had to do all these things, I in my mind, I get like a week more of my lotion. And that's the type of stuff that I constantly am like, okay, that's a week more. So over a year, that's how many bottles didn't I use? And that's really the mindset that we have to be in as individuals.
I love Julie's mindset about this. I think that's great. The only thing I would conclude on is because there's a lot of intelligence here, one of the things that we have to be very careful about is separating out of all the things we could do. We should be very smart about separating out the things that truly make a big difference or truly make any difference at all relative to what it takes to do it. So Julie's point about using the bottom of the hand sanitizer, we can do this and it makes a difference. There are other things that, have sort of good optical value and may not have real sort of value in the long run. If I have $1 to spend in real estate and facilities, I have $1 to spend, I'm going to spend it every time on building automation systems instead of stuff that's highly visible and maybe isn't as effective in getting us to where we want to go. Or spending it in some smart way, to the point of the chats, about acquiring renewable energy that I can confidently say is ours. So I think separating out the effective stuff from the less effective stuff is a serious obligation that we all have to think hard about. Don?
Yeah, and I don't know if there's much more to add, but I would just say, yeah, I mean, help us, I think I always feel like the more feedback and the more ideas that we get always really kind of help us. But I then think, to Alan's point, like we really do try to prioritize, resources are limited, sort of everywhere, and really trying to prioritize where do we think we have the best opportunity, and also, kind of like the patience of trying to, like, each thing takes a little bit of time. Each thing takes, probably a few tries before, we kind of get it right. So I always, feel like working along with us is always appreciated.
Thank you all so much, Julie, Alan, Don. We really appreciate having you here. And I really loved hearing all of your answers to the questions today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So to close out, I just want to remind everyone in the audience that we are recording this meeting, and the recording will be archived on the Climate Year Speaker Series page, which the link will be added to the chat momentarily. And our next Climate Year Speaker Series will be on Thursday, October 21st at 12 p.m. The student experience at COP, and the registration link will also be provided in the chat. Thank you everyone so much for attending and for joining. Thank you all for having your questions in the chat, for being active participants in this panel. Again, we all really appreciate it. So thank you all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Grace.
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you very much.